So I want to take you back to 1900s London. Picture the scene. So you probably got here today, maybe you used Google Maps, you jumped on the tube, but 1900s London, it was slightly more complicated than this. London was growing. It was an exciting place, and nothing was growing more than the tube network. New companies were opening up new lines with their own rules, their own ticketing systems, their own prices, their own maps. It was pretty hard if you actually wanted to get from one place to another, unless it happened to be on the same line for the same company with the same ticket and the same map. Now, just figuring that out was quite complicated, but the maps were basically a bit of a mess. They technically they were correct, but they were very hard to use. Now, then there was a bit of an attempt by someone called Fred Stingmore, and this map was kind of the best of a bad bunch. It was still incomplete. It didn't have all the stops on it. It didn't have all of the tube lines on it, but it brought things together-ish, and it kind of put it over the top of maps that already existed. But then Harry Beck comes along, and he doesn't know anything about maps. He's not a railway expert either, but what he is an electrical draftsman. And he looks at this problem and he sees it completely differently. He doesn't see a map problem, he sees a circuit board. And he figures out it's a circuit board with connections where you can move from one platform, one station to another station, one line to another line. He brings them into one unified map, one unified system, prioritizing clarity. He ditches geography, a little bit like I did in favor of cello lessons, in fact. But he ditches geography and prioritizes simplicity and clarity. Now, at first, people rejected it. It was too different. It was too weird. The distances weren't right. But then people started to use it. And as soon as they started using it, they realized this thing it just makes sense. It's so easy to use. It's so easy. And in fact, this form of doing maps for undergrounds has become the global standard. Other countries have copied this. This is the way we do maps for metros now. Okay, the reason I'm making this point is because schools today are in a similar situation. Schools today are far more than just places of learning. They handle pastoral care, safeguarding, extracurricular activities, pre and post school care for children, parental communications, pretty much everything for rearing children, as well as teaching them. And actually, as each area of responsibility, as each area has grown and developed, platforms have grown alongside to help and facilitate in those things. Multiple platforms. We have platforms for registration. We have a different platform for timetabling, a platform for communication, one for safeguarding, another one for reporting, maybe 3 for co-curricular, and let's have a homework platform as well, and a parental engagement platform. Now, all of these things were built for good reason. And I'd like to point out at this point, this is exactly what we were contributing to when we made Practice Pal. We were another platform solving a niche problem. But this makes a big problem because they weren't designed to work together. So schools today are like early Londoners, desperately trying to figure out how on earth do I get from one side of London to the other when I don't have any maps and I don't actually know which companies I'm meant to be buying tickets from. And I certainly don't know what the rules are on their different systems. So schools are left trying to connect the dots manually, wasting time, money, effort, headspace. Now, the cost of this is quite large and it's real. Schools are spending $500,000. So this is an average state secondary school. Schools are spending $500,000 per year on admin stuff. And often these roles are primarily about managing the systems which are in place. The software is expensive too. Your average school will use 20 different platforms on a daily basis. They'll spend quite a long way over $100,000 per year on their software subscriptions. And then on top of that, they're spending $50,000 a year training staff to use those systems. teacher cost is high as well. So recent studies have shown that actually 50% of a teacher's time is now spent on admin. And apparently 3 to 5 hours per week is simply spent on duplicating data from one system into the other per teacher. 3 to 5 hours per teacher. So schools aren't just spending money, they're spending time, energy, effort, headspace, trying to make these disconnected systems work. And that's time and money that should be going to students and teachers. Okay, so as I said, we were part of the problem in many respects. And so we had a bit of a decision to make. Do we keep adding to the problem and sort of, making money off fragmented systems? Or do we try and rethink the approach and solve the real fundamental underlying problem that everyone is facing? So we started with the question. Every platform right now has its own module or a different platform for a function. So some platforms can have even up to 30, 35 modules, which, let's face it, they're just platforms in disguise. They just happen to be based on the same domain. So the question is, what would it actually take to unify all of those platforms, all of those modules? And bring everything together. And we realized that a school isn't structured at all around the functions or modules that are in these platforms. It's structured around interactions. So just like with Beck, he saw something different. He saw connections between stations. He didn't see geography. And we've looked at schools and we see connections between students, parents, teachers. And those connections are between different groupings involved in school activities. And that has led to the breakthrough of Involved School Portal. Because we realized a school's engine is actually, it's in the calendar. All school interactions that take place, well, there are events in a calendar. A wide variety of events, but they are events in the calendar. So if you're going to unify school management, you have to find a way to get all of a school's calendars into one place. Now, to do this, admittedly, we had to think quite hard. And then a bit harder, because we had to figure out, how do you connect the right events to the right people? Now, the way other platforms have done this historically, in particular in education, is you essentially get a list of students and you attach it to an event. But we realized that actually schools aren't made up of events just sort of attached to individuals. They're made up of events attached to groupings. And those groupings are actually this rich tapestry of interconnected and overlapping groupings. Now, we've called those pods. So a one-to-one music lesson, well, that's a pod. A class, that's a pod. A year group, another pod. A sports team, a music ensemble, a subject department, the staff team, even the whole school, they're all pods. Now, pods they're like the trains running through the underground network, carrying the passengers from one destination to another. And once we'd worked out how to get the events connected correctly to the groupings of people in school, actually the next part was quite fun. Instead of modules, we could put all the tools you needed inside the events. And we could do it just because we knew the type of event that it was and the pods or groupings that you connected it to. So we didn't need to give you, 30 different modules with different functionalities in different places. So, as I say, it got quite fun. And at this point, I feel it's only fair to let James join in the fun. So, James, now, although I've gone into a bit of detail on the structure there, you don't actually need to understand this to enjoy the simplicity, to enjoy the use of it. I believe Einstein even has a quote about simplicity being sort of the other side of complexity or something like that. So James, why don't you show us the simplicity of pods and events in action, this unified calendar?
We're going to start by looking at a teacher's page on Involve in order to see the beauty and simplicity that comes from having this unified calendar sitting on top of that pods structure. So I'm pretending to be Edwina, who's a maths teacher, but is also involved in a spread of activities across school life. So I've got my timeline here, which shows everything I'm involved in from the past through to all of these future lessons and activities. Now, if I open up one of these lessons, my maths lesson here, you can see I've got everything in one place that I need to manage this lesson. So communications with the students and their parents and even other staff members, all contextual to this lesson. And then also attendance. So I can take my register here, take other notes, and I've got all the information I might need about the students in one place. We've even got a seating plan to help manage my class. But if I close that and look at what else I'm involved in, I have a fixture here, which I'm helping out with. And if I open that up, you'll see that, again, I've got this familiar communications interface. And so I can communicate just with the students and parents involved in this fixture. But because we know this is a different type of event, I've got all the tools over here that I need to actually manage this fixture. So I can pick my team. I can see medical notes for the students who are involved, even download those. And I can send a consent form off to parents. Or if we just look through that timeline again, I'm also helping out on a trip here. And if we open that up, we see again, we've got the communication tools, so I can be in touch with just those people involved in the trip. But also I've got all the tools that I need to manage that trip, whether that's going through approval processes internally or attaching consent forms or even downloading the medical notes. Now, the real beauty of the pod structure is that although everything we've seen here was on a teacher's page, exactly the same is true if we look at any other pod. So students are also pods. And if we look at a student like Abjit, we can see everything he's involved in at school, whether that's classroom lessons or his tap dance class or any other club or fixture or school trip. But pods are also groupings of students. And so we can go to the pod for a maths class and see everything that a maths class is up to or all of the communications that they've had. We can even look at a whole year group or even a whole school and see all the messages, all the events related to that pod. Or we could do the same for any of our co-curricular or non-curricular clubs or activity groupings. And again, see all of these events and all of the different communication types in one place. Now, we've looked at all of this from the perspective of a teacher at the school. But another great thing about pods is that if a parent or a student logs in to Involve, they'll also see just the information relevant to them, but in the same structure. So they don't have a totally different module or app that they come in and use, but they get this exact same timeline and all of the features they need that are relevant to them. But we'll see a bit more of that in one of our later demos.
With this launch event and with the official launch of Involve School Portal, the first ever unified school portal available for schools, we wanted to give a taste, a flavour of some of the things that having this unique approach, this way of this different perspective on school management, we wanted to give you a flavour of some of the things that unlocks. And so the development team have been working ferociously hard. I believe the final release was something like 4 or 5 this morning. But we have 3 things to show you, to reveal, which have never been seen publicly before. But for those of you already on Involve, these will be hitting your apps. I mean, some of the updates actually have snuck out earlier today, and you might not have noticed. But others of these updates will be rolling out to your accounts over the next few weeks. But James, let's start with something that in some ways is, in one sense, is not totally flashy, but it is very important. So with insights, knowing what's happening in real time, let's take the example of knowing where all your students are, or rather knowing if any of your students aren't where they should be. So just to give, just to kind of spell out the context, for many schools, attendance is taken in multiple different systems. So you might have one system for curriculum attendance. You might have another for club attendance. You might have learning support registered in a different way. Music lessons registered in their own way as well. And so, then there's this kind of, at any changeover of lesson, at the change of the period in school, there's often this scramble where in the school office, they see the students who have been marked as absent for their curriculum lesson, and they suddenly go on the hunt. They have to try and find them. So there's emails to the music department. They check in with learning support. They might go and have a look physically. And if none of that works, then you get one of those email alerts that I'm sure you're all familiar with, saying, we haven't accounted for this child. Has anyone got them? And then you get the response. So, James, can you show us how you can solve that with the Unified School Portal?
So I'm on Involve and I'm a music teacher, and I need to mark Brady as absent because he hasn't turned up for his cello lesson. Now, Brady has been present in school today, so he's actually now technically missing. And so what this feature does is it automatically alerts attendance officers in school with real-time notifications. So I'm going to mark Brady as absent, and I'm actually the attendance officer for this particular demo school. So you'll see in the top right-hand corner, I've immediately received a push notification into my browser warning me that Brady's gone missing. Not only that, but depending on my settings, I'll have received an email and even a push notification into the Involve app. Now, to make sure this new feature is versatile and works in different school environments, we can see in our settings page that not only can we add one or more attendance officers to receive these alerts, but we can also choose for form tutors, housemasters, and even heads of year to get the same notifications, so that everyone who needs to be is in the loop about any children who might be missing.
I think the next one, this is kind of, for many of us who've been with us through the journey from Practice Power, scheduling is our bread and butter. We love it. And so I want to push you much harder on this. Well, I have pushed you much harder over the last couple of weeks on this one, James. So, sure, you cracked magic scheduling for one teacher for a week. But that wasn't quite enough. So what I want you to figure out, James, is how you're going to explain faster than your algorithm, how many scheduling combinations your algorithm is sorting between before it has completed the schedule for all of a school's co-curricular and non-curricular events and lessons for a whole term. Okay, so I guess bear in mind that this is something that is normally 2 to 3 people's full-time job within school, and so I'm not entirely sure how quickly this is going to run. I know that this is the point that our lead senior developer is particularly nervous about because we're actually doing it live. So don't worry, Dory. We'll find out soon enough. So James, please can you show us how, basically I want you to show us how this works, and then while it's working, I want you to tell us what it's doing.
Many of you will be familiar with our one-click magic scheduling algorithm, which makes it really fast to schedule any kind of co-curricular activity like music lessons with a single click of this button on our calendar. But this new feature we're announcing now takes that to a whole new level. So if I click on Draft Whole Term, I can now run this for an entire term for not just myself, but all the teachers in school, across all different areas of co and non-curricular. So let's hit this button. And the algorithm now is searching through literally billions of possible orderings of schedules through all the weeks of term for all of these teachers. Now, the sheer quantity of data this algorithm is currently processing means it does take typically 2 to 3 minutes for an ordinary school. So I'm going to go and pop the kettle on, and I'll be back in a moment. So there we are. We've scheduled almost 1,000 lessons for this term in about 2 minutes. And the best way to see what this has done is to go to our new month view calendar. And we can see at a glance all of the different activities that have been scheduled in. We can even switch this to view per department and now get a quick summary of all the teachers and what lessons and clubs they've got booked in for the coming term. Now, the last of our new features to announce is one I'm particularly excited about, and we can't wait to see how this one could transform school communications. So I've just been on a school trip, and we've got back, and I've got a whole folder of photos that I'd love to be able to share with parents. So I'm just going to drag some of those into a message, which is how we can attach them and share them with our parents. But when those are attached, you'll see that it's popped up and has recognized that there are some faces in these images. So let's click and see what that's done. So using the headshots which we've got from connecting with the school MIS automatically, the algorithm's been able to actually detect the faces and link them up to the right students in Involve. So just clicking through these photos, great, it's managed to find Clem and Ollie, and there's Ross. Brilliant. So if I save this and send those photos out, two magical things will have now happened. But I'm going to switch to the parent side of our platform to show you. So this is the parent homepage. And if we look in our feed from the school, which has a whole mix of messages, photos, and files, which have been sent to me from all kinds of different classes and activities for my children in school, you'll see that some of these have those photo attachments. Now, the first magical thing that the algorithm has done is it hasn't sent me every single photo that was taken on the trip. It's been able to just distribute the photos to me that actually have one or more of my children in. So you can see that in this case, my child is Ollie here, and all the photos I've got are the photos containing Ollie. But the second thing is the one that I think is really cool. Now, parents across school will have a range of different permissions for photos in terms of whether their child can appear in photos that are shared to other parents, or indeed more widely, perhaps in marketing for the school. And because we have that data, we're able to use a real-time face blurring algorithm to blur out the faces of any children in these photos who aren't my own and who I wouldn't have permission to see. So in this case, Ollie is my child, and Clem's parent didn't give permission for her photo to be shared, and so I can't see it. But because this is a real-time algorithm, it means that if one of those parents changes their permission, then the next time I open up this photo, I'll see it with those other faces blurred or unblurred according to their permissions. Now, we believe this is going to be an absolute game changer for schools, not least because we can finally move to having fine-grained permissions from parents who can specify exactly how and when they want to allow their child's photo to be used. We hope you're as excited about this as we are, and we can't wait to see how schools start using this.